In 2021, a global discussion is happening about independent workers, or the so-called gig economy. But what exactly is it? And how is it relevant to you? Labour market dynamics are shifting rapidly, driven by technological progress and globalisation, with many organisations no longer offering fixed contracts. Meanwhile, surprisingly little is known about the realities of gig work. Is it a liberating new form of self-employment or a new form of exploitation? There is a growing need to reflect on how society deals with these changes in a manner that prepares, protects and educates our working people and protects government taxation and revenue streams. For millions of people, working 9 to 5 for one employer is no longer a reality. Instead, they balance various income streams and work independently job to job. Many factors have led us to this new type of worker. The mass connectivity of international organisations, worker efficiency and the automatic employees, and the tumultuous impact that economic change is having on employers and the employed. It is forcing us all to adapt to new working practices, enabling a new wave of opportunities, but also bringing with it risks which need to be anticipated, understood and addressed. The gig economy is defined as the exchange of labour for money between individuals or companies that actively facilitate matching between providers and customers on a short-term and payment by task basis. If you've ever used an app to call a taxi, book a holiday home or ordered a Just Eat, then you've probably participated in this segment of the economy. The younger generation have been participating in the gig economy for a number of years, but with the global pandemic and subsequent economic downturn, the focus on gig workers is becoming more prevalent as we navigate our way into the new working world. And it isn't limited to new careers or apps. More and more industries are looking at the gig model for innovation. There is now a spectrum of workers engaged in the gig economy, from the casual driver to the high-end tech freelancers, and the spectrum is getting wider, more diverse and in many cases more lucrative. But as with every innovation, there comes uncertainty and the possibility of exploitation. It is up to the policymakers and shapers of society to understand these potential impacts, both positive and negative. And our best way to explore this is with a SWOT analysis. When the strengths of the gig economy work for both the individual workers and for the companies employing them, this in turn strengthens and enhances the overall economy. With working flexibility, this generation of workers can work remotely, work internationally and shape work around other priorities in their private lives. It is an attractive model of work for those with specialist skills who can come in and do a good job before moving on to their next assignment. The strengths for organisations come from immediately accessing skills they require, without the need for a long-term commitment. It also allows companies to test a potential future full-time employee to ensure that their fit with the company is good. These dimensions, when enabled within a framework that protects against abuse, encourage a dynamic business startup culture and allow companies to trial innovations more effectively and scale up rapidly. Those local economies where this employer-employee ecosystem has thrived have adapted more successfully to change and have become the most prosperous regions in the world. A weakness in some areas of the gig economy can be that there is uncertainty with respect to future contract cycles, with the result that workers find it difficult to project their future earnings. That lack of a reliable and consistent earnings pattern can be a significant challenge. While some gig workers can find numerous projects and generate a pipeline of work that will sell their skills in the future, others are having to compete against a growing industry of gig workers. And a lot of the time it comes down to who's willing to do a job for the least amount of money, which drives down rates of return for workers more generally. The laws of supply and demand are at their most ferocious in the gig economy. The more that gig workers can control the price of their supply, the more they will ensure that they get adequate reward for their effort. The biggest problem for individual gig workers centres on their long-term financial prospects, provision for pensions, ability to gain credit for mortgages, etc. The best advice is for each to draw up a personal business plan which acknowledges that there will be ups and downs in earnings, that there may be seasonality, which builds in accommodation for periods potentially of sick or on holidays, and which crucially includes a provision for savings for the future. As for companies, they need to anticipate that each individual gig worker will work differently, and that working with multiple freelancers may affect the consistency of their message or of their service. For policymakers, there is the potential loss of tax revenue and the necessity to provide a pension scheme for gig workers at retirement age. Opportunities to be a casual worker are attractive to the freelancer outlook of today's young people. Policy is catching up to enable gig workers to receive benefits from the companies for whom they freelance. Uber drivers in the UK, for example, are now entitled to the same protections as full-time employees. And policy will continue to support the growth of this style of working in the future, with the aim of protecting the gig worker. For the younger gig worker, the immediate benefits of flexibility may seem to outweigh the negatives. But policymakers need to be careful about how the gig economy is implemented into legislation to ensure the worker, the business and the public finances are protected. Careful thought is required as policy evolves with the growing popularity of the gig economy. The days of staying in a career until you retire with a solid company-provided pension are fast disappearing. As our skill base and working practices adapt to the digital age, it is important that we face up to this reality and take this new model of working seriously. We want to develop the conversations and debates that will ultimately lead to a more stable and secure future for us all.